Susanna Baker, and I'm Studio Montclair's Executive Director, and we are really excited to welcome you to tonight's Curator Talk for our current exhibit, Privilege, Power, in Everyday Life. Privilege, Power, in Everyday Life will be up in our gallery until February 19th. The gallery is open only by appointment right now, but you can schedule those appointments on our website. In the gallery, we're following strict COVID guidelines, including masks, social distancing, hand sanitizer. We have an air purifier, and we are only allowing a maximum of 6 people in the gallery at a time. But if you aren't comfortable coming to the gallery, we have a virtual exhibit on our website that includes audio from most of the artists. And we've also set up the exhibit so that all the artwork can actually be viewed from the street 24/7. So Studio Montclair is a nonprofit organization that provides exhibiting and educational opportunities. We greatly rely on our member volunteers. So I want to thank a few of them before we go on. These are the people who really helped us put this exhibit together. Alan Gorman, our graphic designer, Charlotte Stansky, who does our social media, Janet Boltax, our editor, Susan Ebner, our gallery volunteer, Pam Cooper, and Virginia Block, who installed the show. And as always, I'm thankful for the support of our board of directors, especially our president, Ed Remsen. So this exhibit came out of a conversation I had with Theta during the summer. Like so many other organizations, the staff and board of SMI were deeply moved to issue a statement to stand with Black Lives Matter in demanding change and ending systemic racism. We changed our mission statement to include diversity and inclusion, and we made a commitment to measure every program and event going forward to that statement. After we sent out the statement, Theta called me up and she said, "So, what are you going to do?" And then I have ideas. And if you know Theta, that wasn't a surprise because Theta has a lot of great ideas. So I love this exhibit. It's an exhibit of work that artists felt compelled to make and work that really encourages dialogue about subjects that can be uncomfortable. I believe that having these conversations are a small first step to healing. So now I'd like to introduce our curator, Theta Sandiford. She is an award-winning self-taught artist based in Jersey City. I've known Theta for many years and her work fascinates me. It touches on themes of equity and inclusion, sustainability, anti-racism. She brings people together, creating community through the process of making art. So once again, I want to thank you, Theta, for bringing your vision to Studio Montclair, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this exhibition.
This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I think there's a lot of people that feel the same way and may not know how to actually express how they feel about it, what they can do about it. And so exhibits like this are important, and your participation is important. And especially now. Normally, I would open my studio up and invite people in and work on a project and have conversations, often conversations about identity. And depending on who the participants are, the conversation can go in any number of directions. For me, I can't escape my race because that's who I am and that's how the world views me. And also being a woman, there's lots of layers here. And I think a lot of the exhibitors in the show really expressed all those layers and uncovered them for themselves. And we all have very unique experiences, but there are some commonalities and some themes that I saw in the works that were being submitted. In a way, you guys put the show together because it's really about how you interpreted the prospectus. And there was some conversations from some individuals on social media that felt like maybe this show shouldn't be happening. All the more reason for this show to be happening. Or they felt that, why would we do a call about about bias. Well, isn't it inherent that a show about bias would be inherently biased? And in a way, yes. But the fact is, we all have some sort of biases. And I'm not sitting here going, and I'm not saying that anyone's a bad person. It's what we do with that matters. So I picked a few of the items that I felt sort of in the show that I felt illustrated some of the themes that were overarching themes that several of the artists had. And I wanted to make a slideshow that covered every single piece, but the beauty of shows during these COVID times, the incredible work that Studio Montclair has done to make the virtual show, you can go and see everything. And you can hear from the words of the artists themselves through the audio clips that they submitted, which I think is extraordinary. And I certainly hope continues after COVID, because it's a wonderful way to hear directly from the artists, especially since the openings aren't the type of openings that we might have been accustomed to in the past, right? You would be sitting there waiting to talk to the artists that you would want to. And in this instance, if you are compelled, you can just click. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make sure I'm sharing the right document. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so I'm just going to go to the next slide. So I did mention briefly that a show about bias is inherently biased, and that irony is really not lost upon me. But the point of the show is to provide an opportunity for self-reflection and to share our personal experiences, and all our experiences are valid. Most of the conversations that you have about implicit bias are unproductive. And this is because people are incredibly sensitive to being perceived as racist, sexist, homophobic, ageist, just add any ism. And in the show, there is a lot of work that reflects all those different isms. And I didn't put every single piece here, but I picked on a couple of them. And I picked this piece from Adam Pitt's speech to share right now because it's really about that conversation and having the conversation. And in his background, having worked in corporate America before he made the switch to pursuing his art full time, one of the lessons you learn is you either deal with it or you leave. And sometimes you are unable to speak. And I think this piece really does illustrate why it's important to talk and why some of us have experiences that we've been socialized that we can't actually speak. In reality, none of us are really without some sort of biases. You know, people are meaning-making machines. And if anyone's done the Landmark Forum, you might have heard that before. But it is true because at any one moment, our brains are absorbing and interpreting millions of bits of information about our surroundings. And we create meanings from these data points. And without consciously realizing what we're doing, we often make assumptions about people. And that's what microaggressions, where they're coming from. These subtle, intentional, sometimes unintentional interactions and everyday behaviors can communicate hostile and derogatory messages, and often towards historically marginalized groups. In this piece, Francisco Silva, The Lack of Privilege, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, these are people who are waiting to get into the supermarket. And what he said in his description, a group of Latinos waiting in line at a food bank in Queens. Now, to me, I made no assumption that these were Latinos. They were just a group of people. But this goes to show that based on how we react and how we're socialized, we will make different interpretations of the work. And what I really enjoyed about this piece is that this is a moment of everyday personal life. We see lines like this all the time. And we're wondering, what are they waiting for? If this was pre-COVID times, are they waiting to get into the nightclub? Where are they going? What are they doing? And all of this is based on the data points that we bring from our own personal experiences. So if we're going to talk about our own personal experiences and the filtering, and how our filtering maps to social conditioning and social experiences, unconsciously, even the most well-intentioned person will make some implicit associations based on mental shortcuts. We have a tendency to favor the similar over the dissimilar. And in this piece, Linda John's America in Black and White illustrates how bias and racisms from different groups infiltrates into television sitcoms and turns these ideologies into comedic dialogue. You got Archie Bunker, you got George Jefferson. And I grew up watching these shows with my family and laughing at the jokes. In a way, the stereotypes now, using humor, filters into our subconsciousness and normalizes these stereotypes. Now, looking back, I can say, if I watch some of these shows, I'm like, wow, this was really racist. But at the time when this was on TV, and you got to think about how many spin-offs there were from these shows, this was just accepted. And so in a way, we have become a product of our social conditioning. So when I saw this piece, I was like, yes, that's what I've been saying. So, what do we do with all this? I think we need to think about our assumptions and really think about what it means to be imperceptive to bias and negligent of its impact upon other people. We can all say it's irresponsible, but I think it's important to notice our filtering and to interpret it. And it's really important to test your assumptions. So Donna Basson, in My Own Witness, Rupture and Repair, Sophia, she captured a series of portraits of individuals who felt silenced and invisible. So this was after the 2016 election. And so while the subject visually asserts her identity as a Muslim American by wearing the American flag as a hijab, it also has elements of the image being torn apart with the Japanese practice of kintsugi, I hope I said that right, which repairs broken pottery by highlighting its scars. I think it's a beautiful practice. And by tearing this photo and repairing it, it's really, for me, in a way of interpreting it as testing the assumptions and filtering it out. And the damage and the wounds that are depicted here really are a reflection of our fear of things that are different from us. And it's a resistance to diversity of what it really means to be American. We are all Americans and we all have our own different experiences. And I think that's also ultimately one of the great things about being here, because well, if you look back into your family history, very few of us can claim that we came here, that we were here. We all came here and through our family history at some time. So as artists, we bear witness and record our experience of our times, and we often make connections to our past. And this Areku ceramic set is modeled after tea service sets of the old Southern plantation mansions. There's another tea story that's in here, and I felt both were important to be in the piece because it had its own set of dialogue related to the tea story that would happen. It was a reflection of conversations with her mom. But in this particular piece, Colleen Sweeney, Mammy, it's taking everyday objects that link our past to our current racism. And she's started to make these works as a response to the alt-right march in Charlottesville, Virginia. Went down a rabbit hole of research into Florida babies and how these various figurines are being used to depict certain stories. And there's a series of other pieces of pottery in the work using a chain motif that is associated with our antebellum history. I think it's really compelling work. You see these sort of things, these little figurines in little stores on the, little roadside antique stores, and they're sitting there oh so innocent on the shelf. And people collect these things and often are unaware of what they historically represent. I think it's very interesting way to deconstruct our history. Also, again, this is based on all the themes that I'm seeing throughout the show, and many people had a reaction to injustice. And Elizabeth DeMarco, Say My Name, is reacting to Sandra Bland's murder. And it's her angst of her experience of this reaction. And to me, it spoke to me. I felt the angst, and I love the fact that it was Sandra Bland, because more people know George Floyd's name, or they might know some other names. And Sandra Bland was one of many people that came well before this whole moment of people really reacting to social injustice. Well, you wouldn't have a show like this without people actually responding to the Black Lives Matter movement and actually expressing their works around that. And this piece, J. Stephen Patton, is doing just that with protesters peacefully confronting an armed policeman. What I thought was most compelling about this is how the policeman is looking away as if he has nothing to do with what's going on. And the woman who is on her phone, maybe recording a message, sending it to her friends, maybe she's about ready to be arrested. But there's angst in this piece, and there's a sort of silence in this piece, as well as expression of anger. And I purposely didn't choose a lot of angry pieces. Again, going back to what I said before, is that we're having a conversation and dialogue about things that are uncomfortable. And if we're angry all the time, then people stop listening. If you ever notice that I know that if I speak with a very measured tone when I talk to my husband, he hears me better than when I get angry and actually raise my voice. So many of the pieces have a quiet dignity to them, and I thought it was particularly interesting that the policeman here is wearing the American flag and he's looking away. Many of the other works in the show also ask and make a request to be seen for who they really are. And I found this really compelling. And it brought a real emotional response to the art for me as a curator, because I could actually see them. I can see what they were saying. I can see the request, and I was able to honor that request. And I think we all do by looking at the works. So in this piece, and if I'm butchering your name, I'm so sorry. I think it's Kate Hollister, Mask One. And it's representative of how she feels society makes her feel about her body. And being a larger woman, so am I, she's often discriminated against for her body type, but she also recognizes that there's a level of privilege that she has, because how Black women are, who are of larger frame versus white women, we're treated differently. And so there's a very multi-layered conversation about who we are and how we see ourselves and how we want other people to see us. I think this work really does talk about that being seen part. And we also have other works that are requesting to be seen, individuals requesting to be seen. And again, I mentioned before, not really wanting the show to be about anger. I wanted to have people to relate to the subject matter and the representation of people the way they would like to be seen. I felt that that was a better way to have this dialogue. Now, again, that was my choice. You guys could have chosen different pieces. And so for Barry Fredericks, he has something to say, is also, when I saw this piece, I looked into his eyes, and to me, it says, he called me forth. And in this is a college professor from whom we can learn. And I felt that he really, really spoke to me in a way that said, I am here. And despite all of what's going on, I'm here and you can see me. In a way that when we're looking at what we're seeing, there's also what we do when we look inward. And sometimes the elevation of the mundane really invites people to look closely. And it's not just what's in front of us, but it's what we say about that in our head. So Miriam Stern, Cover Up number 8. This is a work that really has that concept of introspection. And she painted over another piece. Some of the old painting is in the work. It's mixed media. You really have to see it to see the layers. This image doesn't really do it justice. But there's dirty paint rags at the back of a canvas, and something is bleeding through on the canvas that's staining the rag. It's concealing, and there's some things being concealed and some things being revealed. And in this process of thinking about looking inward to express ourselves outward, there's a sense of honesty to it. And I felt that this piece really illustrated that. Just a few more works to talk about. So in this trend, I've noticed that, in this moment of social justice awareness, there's a trend towards calling people out for their biases and indiscretions. And this is cancel culture. And in my view, it creates a culture of shame. Instead, I'm proposing, why don't we call ourselves in? Let's not call each other out. Let's call ourselves in. And by acknowledging that we all have something inside us that we may not all like, some inherent biases, and consciously work to prevent them from influencing our actions. And in this piece, Evan Stewart Marshall, Searching for Ways to Connect, is really looking at how different people are having misconnections and they have to make the effort to make a connection with one another. In a way, to me, I felt that this was super illustrative of what it would mean if we called ourselves in rather than called people out. So if we consider that doing nothing and saying nothing is as bad as overt discriminatory actions, then silence really is violence in a way. Deborah Friedkin, I think I said it right. Hear no evil, see no evil. In this way, this addresses people's apathy and hesitancy to get involved. And so I'm using this piece as part of this presentation to call you into being, powerfully into being, to be involved. I think all the artists here actually already are. So I'm going to give you guys a pass. You're already involved. You're submitting, you're here, you're engaged, you're obviously interested in the subject matter. So you're part of the solution and not part of the problem. So in the context of race, because there's lots of other works in here. There's in the show. There's Homelessness Express. There's reaction to neo-Nazism, immigration, people's bias against LGBTQ community. There's a lot of different things. We got a lot of work to do as a society. But in the context of race, because that's me as a curator and something that's near and dear to my heart, I would say it's not enough to say I'm not racist, but you would have to be actively anti-racist. And that's a little harder. But that's the work that has to be done. Owning up to your part, owning up, and no one is absolved of this. Everyone has a part to play. And sometimes by asking yourself why I'm remaining silent can make the difference by simply speaking up and saying, no, that's not true, or I'm sharing my truth. And Alison Fraser Diaz in Treason made this mixed media piece based upon her experience of people putting her hands in her hair. In fact, that's what my series, I Am My Hair, was completely inspired by the experience. People randomly come up to me on the PATH train and just stick their hands in my hair all the time. So she uses text from a Gwendolyn Brooks piece talking about race that was written in the 1960s that really talks about the humanity of Black folks. And the text has been altered, redacted, and in a way to show the roots of racism. I thought it was a very interesting way to talk about where these isms come from. So I want to thank you all for your participation.